If you don't like staple guns, this is the way to go.
All right.
You don't have to staple anything. This is a sheet of watercolor paper, although you can also use printmaking paper. That'll be totally fine. And then you take paper tape, which you really can get at any shipping supply store. You wet the back of it, you place it on top, and then you gesso it, and it comes out perfectly flat.
Cool. How do you remove the tape afterwards? You just peel it off like painter's tape?
No. That's going to be a disaster. You just take a utility knife and you just cut down like this. And I think it's good to use plywood. I wouldn't use something that's thin, but you also don't want to use like an expensive piece of wood because obviously...
Because you're cutting, right?
Yeah, you're cutting on it and that's not going to work so well. So you just pick it up like this.
Sweet.
And then do you see how there's still paper tape here?
Yeah.
I just take a pair of scissors and I just cut it off.
So do you do the painting when it's on the board, or do you do the painting after you cut the piece out?
You would want to do the painting first and then cut it off. Although...
Because otherwise now you just have like a piece of gessoed paper.
Yeah, I mean, this is fine too. You could just paint on it like this if it doesn't bother you.
But painting when it's under the tape is what gives you the tautness.
Yes. The key to this technique is you have to soak your paper first.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't soak your paper, this is not going to work.
That's funny. I wouldn't expect that, though. Like, I soak watercolor paper all the time for stretching and stapling it. But even for something like this?
Yeah.
Cool.
And if you have a huge sheet of paper, you can do it in your bathtub, which I've done on many occasions. Okay, so this is nice and wet. And then what I do to get rid of the excess water is I hold it up, and then do you see the little stream of water that's coming down? And I wait until that just drips. Now the paper is sopping wet. You don't want it to be that way. You got to make it damp, so I just put it on top of a towel like this, and then cover it with the towel. I just press down like that. And then when you take the towel off, it's nice and damp. If you see some shiny spots, that probably means that it didn't get blotted enough. So you can just go back and get rid of those shiny spots like this. And now you have a perfectly damp sheet of paper. You're going to take your paper tape and you're going to measure it so that it's a little bit longer than the side of the paper.
Okay.
The paper tape has a gummed adhesive on the back, so you just take a wet sponge, just pull it over like this.
Okay.
And you want to put it down so it covers about half the paper. Press it down like this. And then that side is finished.
Nice.
You're going to do that on all four sides. The paper is going to get all buckly. And that's when people freak out. They go, oh my God, it's all wavy. It's not going to work. But it comes out perfectly flat the next morning.
Oh, nice.
It's like magic. It's a pretty smooth surface, so I think it's important to really spread the gesso. If you don't spread it, it tends to get almost lumpy, and you don't want that to be the case. And you want to make sure that you paint over the paper tape. Don't paint just up to the edge. That's not going to work.
Why wouldn't that work?
Well, because then the watercolor paper isn't going to stretch all the way. You have to have it totally covered with gesso. Now, do you see how the paper's starting to buckle a little bit? Like if you look down here, it's not quite flat.
Yeah, and over here, like if this was my first time doing it, I'd feel like I did it wrong.
Yeah. No, you didn't do it wrong. It's going to look like this while it's still wet, but then the next morning, it's going to be perfectly flat.
Oh, cool.
It's like magic. It's awesome. I guess in a way, this is like making your own canvas paper, but it's nicer because it's more smooth, and probably the paper isn't quite as floppy as canvas paper. A lot of people, I think, don't know that you can actually stretch watercolor paper or printmaking paper on stretcher bars.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a great option because sometimes canvas can be a little bit more expensive than the paper. The other thing is this is if you want a really smooth surface. I know.
Yeah, sign me
are
up.
one of those people. So this is a great option because if you paint with oils, it's a totally different experience. You really just feel like you're painting almost with a different type of paint when you have such a smooth surface. The first thing you want to do is get your sheet of watercolor or printmaking paper, and you're going to measure so that you have about, what's that, like 2.5 inches
Yeah.
from the stretcher bar. So I'm just going to take this, and now it's the right size. Now you're going to take the paper and you're going to soak it. So you can just take a tray like this, or if you have a bathtub, you can just toss it in the bathtub, and it's going to come out really wet. So you just hold it up like this, let the water run from that bottom corner, and then when it starts dripping, just put it on a regular towel. Put the towel on top because you don't want the paper to be sopping wet when you stretch it. You see shiny spots, it's still a little bit too wet, so I just go in and I dab. And now you have paper that's ready to stretch.
All right.
Now you want to take your stretcher bar frames and you're going to put it in the center, get your staple gun, you just fold this over nice and carefully, you just stick one staple in the middle. The procedure for stapling is the exact same thing as a canvas, except you don't want to use canvas pliers.
Yeah, because that'll just like rip it off.
Yeah,
And also, watercolor paper is so much more dramatic in its tightening when it dries.
Absolutely. You'll also notice that the watercolor paper is just really stiff. It's so different to stretch than canvas. You want to flip to all 4 sides like this. I don't find I'm really stretching much. I'm more folding and stretching just a little bit. And that's mostly because the watercolor paper is just so stiff. It just doesn't want to be pulled. And that's fine.
And it will look really wobbly on the front.
Oh, it looks terrible on the front.
Until it dries. And
Until
then
it
it's just nice and
dries,
crisp.
and then it's going to look fantastic. Folding over the corners is a little bit harder with watercolor paper just because it's stiffer.
Oh, and you don't want it to tear or anything?
No, so you have to be a little gentle with it.
Okay.
But it's the exact same fold. I mean, you basically do the fold that we did with the canvas, and you just staple it just like that. It's like bumpy and crappy, and don't worry because it's supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
And do you see how it's bouncing almost?
Yeah.
Like it just looks so bad, and you're just gonna stress that it looks horrible. But trust me, it's gonna all stretch out in the end. And again, this is more critical for oil painting. If you're doing acrylic, it's not the end of the world if you don't paint the edges. Look at how it looks.
That
the
looks
next
perfect.
day.
Yeah.
It's awesome, and this really is like a drum.
That's nice.
It's awesome.
And yeah, the surface is so smooth. And you didn't sand this or anything,
No,
did you?
no sanding at all.